Welcome to Mental Healthy, the podcast where we share stories of the professionals and experts worldwide working in the mental health field. Here's your host, Dr. Kenyon Knapp.
Well, welcome everyone to the Mental Healthy Podcast. I'm glad to have you with us here today. We're in our series of podcasts right now about textbooks and scholarship of faculty here at Liberty University. And I've got some heavy hitters with me here today who really are scholars and have written all kinds of stuff. Dr. Hanor-Walker, Dr. BoHecker, and Dr. King, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you all here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Knapp.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, I'm familiar with you all because I work with you here at Liberty, but some of the listeners might not. So why don't we just have you introduce yourselves a little bit? Dr. Hanor-Walker, do you want to share about your background a little bit?
Sure. I'm Teshaunda Hanor-Walker. I'm a native of Georgia. I have been at Liberty now since 2015. I'm also an author and co-author, of course, with the folks here. And I have several years of experience as a licensed professional counselor in the state of Georgia. And I just love working with families, particularly marriage and family counseling in private practice as well.
Great. Well, glad to have you. And Dr. BoHecker, give us a little bit of your background.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Lynn BoHecker, and I'm core faculty at Liberty University. My master's degree is from a KCREP accredited marriage and family counseling program, and my doctoral degree is in counselor education. I also am involved with a counseling center located in our church, and so marriage and family and integrating church and professional counseling, as well as the scholarship involved in being a faculty, are my passions.
Great. Well, welcome, Dr. BoHecker. And Dr. King, last but not least.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. John King is my name. A lot of people in my town call me Pastor John. I've been a pastor for many years, but I do have my PhD from Regent University in counselor ed. I've worked here as a core faculty member since 2018, but I live in central Pennsylvania. One of the things that kind of gives me passion about this project is family. My wife and I have 33 years of marriage and 10 children, 4 of whom we've given our last name after their birth and have incorporated them into our family. And it's just something that she and I are very passionate about. And we'll talk more about that later as we go on in the podcast. But it's something that we are just really, really grateful to be part of the kingdom of God in that area.
Well, that's great. Well, welcome, Dr. King. Now, they're all here today because they wrote a great book recently, Marriage and Family, God's Design. And there, Dr. King's got a hard copy. That's great. And by the way, later on, if you come to the website, we'll have a link to the book at the website. You can check it out there electronically. But really glad to have you all here and glad to have you writing that book. That's really a goal of us, is not just teaching well, but having scholarship as well and influencing the field that way. One of the questions I had for y'all is, what type of course did you have in mind when you were writing this textbook? Because it feels like it might be able to go a few different directions.
Absolutely. Our textbook was written with a KCREP accredited marriage and family counseling program in mind. So it's ideally suited for graduate level counseling programs that desire to teach marriage and family counseling courses that include an integration of biblical principles. So the textbook could be integrated into the program in many courses and throughout the program. So because it was written around the KCREP standards, it could be used for the introductory course. It could be used in any of the internship and practicum courses because it has a lot of specific information, and any and all of the KCREP standards are addressed throughout this book.
That's great. I bet there's a lot of faith-based programs around the country that have, for years never really had a textbook from a Christian perspective. And I'm not aware of any others. And so you're sort of breaking ground here as far as I know. Is that true, or are you aware of others that have been around?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any others. And really, as we think about writing, we want to make sure that we find the gap. the area that's not being addressed. So that's really where the impetus for this project came from, because we wanted to have a really good, solid textbook for these kinds of programs that incorporates biblical principles and biblical values. So, yeah.
Well, that's great. That's great. I'm always glad when you can fill a gap like that. And I think we have a few of them when it comes to Christian colleges and having textbooks that can, infuse a Christian perspective on the academic topic. But let's delve a little deeper. Give us an overview of the marriage and family book, God's Design. How many authors and institutions are represented in the textbook?
Well, the textbook has 28 chapters, and there are contributions from over 40 authors from at least 8 educational institutions. And it's organized into 5 different parts, which is the foundation of the history, the role of counselors, counseling theories, assessments, and genograms. And then it moves into changes in the 21st century families, cultural issues in marriage and family counseling, and the foundations and histories.
Well, that's great. Well, I have to admit I have not read the entire textbook yet, but I have skimmed over parts of it. And I recall in chapter 1, there's some overarching principles you talk about. Could you give the listeners a feel for what some of those are?
Sure. The first chapter actually sets the tone for the entire textbook. We wanted the foundation to start with God, and actually because marriage is instituted by God, and being clear about that was important to us. In the chapter 1 in particular, we talk about God's purpose for marriage, and we know that the marriage God's way should be reflective of the kingdom of God, and so we wanted to marry that concept, so people are very clear from the first chapter, and then it basically tells the story in the chapters thereafter. Also in chapter 1, because we know that marriage right now has become a hot topic in culture, we wanted to also address the changes that have happened in culture related to marriage, but we wanted to give the background in such a way that the appreciation for God's design isn't lost in culture. So we talk a little bit about what was the role of Adam, what was the role of Eve, how that set the tone for marriage today. And we wanted to offer some distinctions between government marriage versus God marriage. And so in the chapter, we put a table together or some kind of diagram that kind of gives a visual of how those two types of marriages are very different, and how the one that is instituted by God actually has more of a lifelong purpose and fulfillment and representation of kingdom. So I hope we did a great job in trying to unpack that. And then we offer a prayer as well that counselors could use when they're praying with the couple.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, if I could take my counselor, educator hat off and put my pastor hat on, I'm rejoicing that there's an opportunity that can actually teach marriage and family counseling from a biblical worldview in this way. Obviously, there's a lot of brokenness and an attempt to redefine what family should be, and I'm just really glad that there's a solid biblical foundation for marriage. Understanding that not everyone's going to be there, but at least we can understand the how do you spot a counterfeit? We look at what perfection is. So in a sense, that's what we're attempting to do here.
Well,
I'm sorry. The book title is Marriage and Family, God's Design. It's chosen on purpose, and so that really relates, I think.
Well, that'll probably give a lot of reassurance to a lot of listeners who are wondering at what angle is this going to go. And I certainly picked up so far that there's a lot of CACREP guidance about the CACREP standards for marriage and family counseling. But I read also in the book a little bit that you can apply this to other settings too, like if you wanted to have a professional counseling center in a church. So could you talk about that a little bit? Like how does this apply to maybe giving people guidance on having a professional counseling center located in a church?
So part of what we've done is had a professional counseling center located within a church. And it takes quite a while to answer that with all of the history and the different models of the way that that's done. But what we did was we started a public charity that's a professional counseling center. And we also work with the pastors in the church. And so what we do is we call it hand holding. So the pastors may be working with someone and there are some mental health issues that are present. And so they refer that person to the counseling center while maintaining a relationship and a scriptural discussion with that person. So the person may be going to the counseling center to help with their mental health issues, and then also simultaneously meeting with the pastors. So we also have then quarterly have a community meeting where we invite counselors and pastors to come, and we have topics that are discussed about how we can partner, how professional counselors can partner with the pastors and people who are ordained in a range of denominations and faiths to partner together to work with people, that we are not a mutually exclusive professions, that we can work together.
That's great. It sounds like you're building trust between those groups as well, because sometimes they don't trust each other. But when you have those meetings, you get to know each other and break the ice and all that. And then the referrals come and people are helped. So that's great. Now, you've touched on this topic already, but there's a lot of cultural issues and cultural clashes and cultural wars, per se, that go on. And you do address a lot of current cultural issues in the book, but you've got a chapter, Kingdom Over Culture. And how is culture addressed in the textbook?
Well, we do it with intentionality, partly because, the thought was we could actually not address what's happening in culture and the cultural divide, or we could just, get in front of this conversation and just offer a balanced perspective. The reality is God cares about diversity. He cares about every, different race of people. But however, the main group of people is the human race. And so we know that humans were created to be in relationship with God. And so this particular chapter is about bringing the perspective back to the Creator. Yes, diversity has a lot of beauty in it, from plants, animals, trees, everything you look at in nature, there is a lot of diversity. But ultimately, the Creator is the one who actually created this type of diversity. So in this chapter, we're trying to bring them back to what is it like to be from a different culture, and yet you want to convert over to Christianity. What is that experience like for those families? What their lived experience could be, and how do we rally around them as professional counselors when they want to really live out their Christian values, but the family may not agree, or there may be some oppression. So we do address the persecution that Christians often face, particularly for those who are converting from other religions and other cultures. So we just offer a few tips on how to provide care and counseling in this particular chapter. But we also talk about things like syncretism, and how to not get, deceived into that, wanting to hold on to some things that just do not align with the first and second command as written in scripture. And so we give some examples of what are some of those things that culture, is kind of presenting to us that may be deceptive, and we are not sure that they are. So we highlight some things that are more Eastern practices that have come into the Western culture. And, those things may conflict with what you say you value and believe. And it's really this chapter is about bringing awareness, how not to, be deceived in culture, but also how to embrace the love that God has for you.
Well, that's great. It's encouraging to know that you don't ignore the issues in culture that can create friction within families.
Right.
I hear you addressing a lot of those topics here, which is great. But I know there's even more topics in the book too that you address. So you're not like ignoring, the elephant in the room per se. What are some of the
Right.
changes in the 21st century about within families that you talk about in the book as well? Additional ones possibly.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we really wanted to do a really good job at highlighting and addressing and being more specific. So in part three, for example, we went deeper into like counseling two-parent families, counseling single-parent families, both single mothers and single fathers. There's a difference. There are differences there, and for my wife and myself, as we are looking, we're in the orphan care field. We're seeing lots of kinship care families. Just in my church, there's a couple grandparents that are caring for grandchildren. One who adopted her granddaughter at age 60. And so here she is. She's trying to raise this child and struggling. And so we recognize the changes in those families. And my wife and I co-authored chapter 13 on counseling adoptive and foster families. And there's another chapter on blended and bonus families. And we obviously identify what a bonus family is. But there are many more of those kinds of families that exist in our culture. And we just need to recognize the unique aspects of that. Here's the thing, from my standpoint, I think the social work field is way far ahead than the counseling field in working with adoptive families. Because, it makes sense because the social workers often will help that process happen. But once the adoption happens, for example, the social workers kind of, they may have some aftercare, but generally speaking, when a family then struggles, where do they go? Well, they go to the counseling field, but the counselors aren't prepared for it. So that is changing, and I'm hoping that there will be faculty members and people in our school and other schools that'll say, "Hey, this is important," because I would say in the Christian family, in the larger Christian family, especially in America, there's a growing trend toward people growing their families through the kingdom building measure of adoption. And so I think it's really important for us to not stick our head in the sand and to recognize that we are about helping people who have no future to have a future and a hope. And so I think that's important for us. So, and then there are other parts in the book that we have chapters on military and first responders, refugees, families facing violence and addiction and bereavement and all sorts of divorce, remarriage, separation. And so I think we really try to be more practical in those chapters. And I think it's been a really helpful thing for readers.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
You make me think of, really all Christians can relate to what you're saying about adoption, because Jesus came to his own, but his own received him not. And as Christians, we're adopted into God's family, but we don't always think of that. We forget certain scriptures like that.
Oh, how much time do
really
you have? You
right.
opened the can of worms there. Yeah, that's absolutely. It's scriptural. It's theological. Adoption changed my life. So, and it changes the lives of families and in a good way, but it's hard. So,
Yeah. This is encouraging because you're addressing so many different topics and really a diversity of family issues that, I've been a counseling professor for over 25 years, and there's a lot of topics you're addressing that just get ignored or not addressed in a lot of books I've seen. And I know there's actually more additional topics that are discussed in your book too. So what are some other additional topics we haven't even gotten to yet?
Well, I think this book, you started out asking what's different.
Hmm.
Part 4 and part 5, it's probably going to be the biggest difference in our textbook versus others, because most textbooks will not address controversial topics. We make sure, again, the kingdom over culture topic, that we also address reproductive issues through the lifespan. We talk about same-sex attraction or gender, or gender dysphoria. Well, a lot of textbooks are just not hitting that conversation or those conversations from a biblical worldview. And so we wanted to, particularly in the reproductive issue chapter, because the whole country was, all over the place in uproar over reproductive rights. And but no one really is talking about the grief and the loss associated when mothers make those decisions. And so we're highlighting some of that process of what they go through when they're having to also mourn the loss of a decision like that. But at the same time, we're also wanting to talk about the beauty of being a parent, right? And the joy that comes from that, and the choices that we do have as women as well. And then what are some of the issues that women have, in general when they're wanting to have a family? And so we're trying to make sure we offer love and care as much as we can, but also God's truth. And so we do a nice mix of how to balance that conversation in that particular chapter. And then in the chapter on same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria, we address topics about, am I born in the wrong body? Where's the research that supports that? Is there research that support that? And we talk about, counseling, families who are trying to, decide, do I support my children in some of these things, or, or how do I balance that with my faith and all those things? So we try to look at what a developmental process may look like for a person who's trying to unpack their gender or their belief about gender and same sex. And we also look at it through God's lens. What does he say? What has he already said on that topic? And how do we as a family help families align more with God's perspective on it and appreciate that perspective as truth? So those are just some of the highlights there. And then as we continue on in part 5, we do kind of address a few more topics that generally are not discussed in Christian textbooks. So I think we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Well, that's great. I noticed too, you had a chapter on generational curses in families, and I found that really interesting because I think a lot of people can relate to this,
Right.
but in one way or another. But like for me, my name is Kenyon Christian Knapp, and my uncle Kenyon, who I was named after, committed suicide, and so there's been some suicide in my family. Other people have issues like alcoholism sort of runs in their family and things like that. But tell me about your chapter. I know you got a chapter called How to Raise a Child in Today's Culture and How to Break Generational Curses in Families. Give us a feel for that chapter.
Yeah, that's chapter 27 and 28. Just we can think about it this way. We are the most individualistic culture in the history of the world, and that impacts how we parent and how we raise our children and how we help our children grow into adulthood. Unfortunately, in my opinion, I think a lot of parenting these days tends to focus on activities rather than character building, and especially relationship building and attachment and attunement. So there's just a lot of disintegration of family structures. There's a extended family in my family that's breaking up, and it's tragic. It's tragic. And when these family structures break apart, it really creates unhealth and safety that just kind of seems to perpetuate itself generation after generation. But the chapter 27 covers ways about how do we rethink our parenting when we're so individualistic. It covers ideas like attachment. I know that for children who experience a lot of trauma, especially in the early years, attachment is a huge thing. The people in trauma-informed care talk about attachment a lot, and they focus on it because it's so important and how we attune to our children. But they also integrate neuroscience and all of those areas of the brain as well.
In talking about these topics, it really fits in with marriage and family, the conceptualization and the systemic thinking of marriage and family overall, that the individual person is always within a context. And so for us, understanding all of the, as many as we can, different contexts in which people live and the family structures in which people live, because it all matters to how the individual will be able to integrate therapy, counseling, how interventions are approached, really viewing people from that systemic lens and providing marriage and family counselors or professional counselors who want to learn about other cultures and other ways of being, that they are able to do that through this textbook.
Yeah. I would also just maybe even transition into chapter 28 when we talk about generational curses. I think about it this way. One of the greatest characters in the book of Genesis is Jacob. And many of you know the story of Jacob. And his name means deceiver, heel grabber. Well, where did that come from? Well, it came from his father, his grandfather, his great grandfather, and all of the deception, the generations of deception that came on. And it was almost like he carried these stories of his family of deception after deception, and he himself, the deceiver, became deceived with his uncle Laban, and just the mess of that. And then there was this time where he wrestled with God before he was going to meet his twin brother, and God wrestled with him all night, toyed with him really. And it's a quick 2-point sermon. What happens with you when you wrestle with God? You get a bad hip. Meaning God says, no, I'm the Lord, you're not. But then the second thing is even more powerful. You get a new name. I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And God says, okay, what's your name? And he said, Deceiver. Your name's no longer Deceiver, but Israel. And from that point on, if you look at Jacob's life, Israel's life, it was a change. It was a change. Now, his children, had to deal with it. I mean, they did their own deception. But there was this piece where breaking generational curses, we don't talk about that in academia. We hardly talk about it in church. But I think Dr. Sequel Bartley does a great job in just highlighting this idea that we carry on the transgressions of generations before us. And good news for us as followers of Christ is that as counselors, we are witnesses, we are empathic witnesses to God doing that regeneration work for not just clients, but for their children, their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren. Like, what an amazing gift that is for us to witness those miracles of generation. So we really felt like at the end of the book, this was something we wanted people to begin to think about. And I think Dr. Bartley did a great job in giving some scriptural ideas for it. So
that sounds great. You're selling me on it right now.
It's right here.
There you go. We're going to get to that. I'll tell you what, I want to ask you though. I mean, we're all professors though. I mean, like we've been teaching at universities for a while and all that. And as professors, and I should say too, to you, the listeners of this program are a mixture of graduate students and professors in different mental health fields. So speaking to the professors listening here, you've got this new textbook, and of course, we're always looking for different supplemental materials that could go with it to sort of make it a little more helpful. What are some of the supplemental materials you have with this book?
Well, the goal was to make it as easy as possible so you can be about teaching the students and not so much about the preparation that's needed for each course. So the test bank has already been prepared for you. We've already put together the PowerPoint presentations for every chapter. We have videos that are spread throughout the textbook. So that way you will have a snapshot of what to expect and see a glimpse of the person who might have written that particular chapter. We also have discussion questions at the end of every chapter. We have case studies throughout the chapter, if not every chapter, have some sort of vignette or case study or some sort of that. So the goal was, again, to make it as easy as possible so you can really focus on the content and the teaching, the pedagogy of it, and not so much on all the other pieces that need to assess student learning. So if we could make that, accessible and easy, we were thinking from our own lens of, what takes up our time. And we wanted to reduce that for the professors who are going to teach it. Also, another point I want to make is that each of us wrote a chapter with our spouses, and we each have over 20 years of marriage experience with our spouses. And so that element of writing a chapter with our spouse was also to signify that marriage works when it's done God's way. And, we wanted that to be an encouragement to the students, the readers, just whomever who see marriage sometimes and see, not the best version of marriage. And so just wanted to put that in there as an inspiration, we hope, to the readers that we are not just writing this, we're living it. And we are witnesses of what God can do through marriage.
That's awesome. I like that personal touch, because sometimes books can be a little dry, like it's just all information, but it sounds like you're putting a little more personality in your book. That's really cool.
Sure.
Let me ask you, I'm sold. So if there's somebody listening now, a student or faculty, whatever, where can they get a copy of the book? And John, if you want to hold it up again so they can see what it looks like.
Yep. Looks like this.
Where can they get a copy of that?
Yeah, two easy places. One, if you want a hard copy, you can go to Amazon. It's on Amazon, Marriage and Family, God's Design. But an easier way, actually, to gain access to it right away would be the Kendall Hunt Publishing website, kendallhunt.com, and then look for this, Marriage and Family, God's Design. There's two ways that you can receive this. One is an e-textbook. You can get it right away through, I use Vital Source Bookshelf as a program. You can also get a hard copy as well for a little bit more. Some people like this, the personal touch with having something in their hands. So, that's where we go.
That's great. I know there's a lot of programs across the country that appreciate that ebook version, just a little more affordable, but then they can have it immediately, which everyone wants everything right away these days, so that's great. Well, I'd say before we go, we're getting near that time. I always try to give the guests an opportunity to share just last minute thoughts, things that are on your heart or mind that you want the listeners to hear. So any last minute, maybe if you, I don't want to put y'all on the spot, but if you have any last minute thoughts, if you go around and share your last thoughts with the listeners.
I'll go first. I just want them to be encouraged when it comes to marriage. Don't lose heart. God is still in the marriage business. He created it. He designed it. He's the author of it, and he's the one that's going to preserve it. And I think in the world of academia, we really just have to not lose heart in that. If there's a way to integrate, the Christian perspective in what we teach, let's always try to do that, because the world that we're living in now, we do not want to lose God's design for how and what has established us, not only in America, but in the world.
Mm. Yeah.
Well said. Yeah.
Another thing that came to mind while we were talking is that there are other applications other than professional counseling programs or marriage and family counseling programs. This textbook could also be used in seminaries.
Mm-hmm.
It could also be used in with site supervisors. It can be used by clinicians to have on their shelf if they work with someone who is of a particular population that they haven't worked with before, or the contextual factors, and just as a reminder. So it's for professional counselors, marriage and family counselors, seminary students, and anybody who really wants to have this as a reference so that it has a broader application.
Yeah. We love families. We love marriages. And, our hope is that this book will be that. Just a small word for professors and program directors. There's a way to get a copy of this book, a complimentary copy if you're considering it for your program. You can go on the Kindle Hunt website and request a copy. They would love to connect with you about that and how it can be used. We're also available. We'd love to connect with you if you have any questions at all about okay, how would this course or this book fit? And we have this certain course or in a seminary or in a graduate program. We'd love to do that. We'd be glad to connect with you if you have further questions for us.
Well, let's go there then. If there's a listener going, well, I want to know more about this or how it could apply here or there, how would you want people to contact you?
Well, my email address is fine, thanor-walker@liberty.edu, or I can be reached at a private email, drhanor-walker@addmorepeace.com. So any of that is one way to reach me particularly.
Great. And I know your email addresses with Liberty too are on the Liberty website, since you're all professors
Correct.
here as well. So that's another way. But great. Well, this is good. You're giving people lots of options and lots of choices here, and it's obvious that this book covers so much ground, which sounds great. And we're excited about that. And I wanted to thank all of you, by the way, for being on the podcast today, Dr. Hanor-Walker, Dr. BoHecker, and Dr. King, and appreciate you being here. And listeners, you have a great resource here, Marriage and Family, God's Design. I'd encourage you to check it out. And then join us next time here in the Mental Healthy Podcast, and we'll look forward to it. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mental Healthy. If you want to hear more episodes, please hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts, and head to linktree.com/mentalhealthypodcast for all of our social media platforms with the latest mental healthy content. If you have a story to share that relates to what we discussed in in or any other episode, please contact us at mentalhealthy2020@gmail.com. That's mentalhealthy2020@gmail.com. Thank you, and God bless.